Welcome to the Build with Boundaries podcast. My name is Mahnaz, and this podcast is for mums who want to carve out time so that you can work in ways that work for you, your life, your family, and of course your business. Together, we will discover why you are not prioritising your business and the actions that you can take so you can live an intentional, productive, and fulfilled life without mum guilt. So let's dive in to today's episode.
So welcome back everyone. I have Sarah Evans here and we are talking about values. So today's topic is how you can use values to create an authentic brand in the age of AI. We are going to dig deep into this because I think being authentic and really getting to know ourselves better through our values is so important. So we have another 2 episodes that we have done, the previous 2, so go back and listen to those where Sarah and I discussed how to connect with your why when building your passion business and also knowing your stress triggers and how to manage them. Go back and watch them, because it sheds a different kind of light and perspective on all these areas, and they are all equally as important. Authentic brand, that word is used and overused, but let's start with what that means. What does authentic brand mean to you?
Like you say, we hear it a lot, and again I think as a business owner on your own, certainly I found it, there's so much information about how you should market yourself and how you should brand yourself, and you've got to be authentic, but what on earth does authentic mean? And it takes me back to the start of my career, which was working in film and TV and developing stories and characters for many, many years. And part of that is like how we develop authentic characters. Characters that you can actually believe are real. And the way that we do that is to really look at point of view, who that person is and what their view of the world is. And that comes from core values. So that work is done in character development. And when it's not worked, if you've got a character who's really two-dimensional and you don't warm to, because that depth of that work hasn't been done. And so when I started working with clients around uncovering their values using story, I use the power of story to do that, because we are all stories. Our lives move from story to story to story. So I use that as part of how we kind of understand ourselves, understand what our core values are, how they drive us. And when we do that, you then have what are really uniquely authentic stories, because there are things that have happened to you, which then you can use to understand the values that you create for your business. And if you're a solopreneur and you're building your business, you are your business, so it's your core values that are really driving the values of the business. There may be some slight changes, but generally they're pretty much the same. So by understanding your story, the story part of where your values come from and how they've shown up in your life, we can then work to actually find the right stories to explain your values, your business, your outlook, your point of view, and that makes you stand out as an authentic brand, not something that's just feels manufactured, feels the same as other brands in your market.
I love that, and I think that bringing out that uniqueness of you, your values are such a powerful way of doing that. We just don't really link everything together and think that the common theme, if you like, is understanding your values. But as you were saying that, it's fascinating. I think this is such a great part of it, where people can share what their different values and how they've showed up in their story and their kind of book of life, and all the chapters that they have. I think it would be really interesting if we share our top values, and I know you've already shared that honesty is yours, so can you talk us through maybe highlights and key moments where from a very young age up to now you feel this is why, this proves that honesty is mine to own as my top core value?
It's interesting the way that it comes out. I got involved in I always loved stories, which when you think about it are, in one way, fiction is the opposite of being authentic. You kind of, so it can feel strange, but actually when you're when someone is true to who they are, then that has always felt right to me. So I've never, I've got lots of examples when I was younger, not feeling comfortable in environments. I was always, if there were friends at school that were very fake, I couldn't, I just couldn't deal with it, even though I wanted to, because maybe they were in the really popular gang and you kind of wanted to be part of that gang, but I didn't understand myself in that way. But going through life then, there's so many examples in our family and personal life, which mostly are quite funny, because I have a ridiculous aversion to kind of not being honest, which doesn't mean that I've never told a lie in my life. But one example was when we were on holiday. It was the first time I'd been to Florida, so I was 21. It was my 21st birthday. My parents and my brother, who's quite a few years older than me, and he was living in America at the time, so we met him in Florida, and we were going off to Disney World, and in order to get free tickets for Disney World, we had to go to this breakfast, like free breakfast, which was basically a sales talk for accommodation in Florida. So we just basically had to sit through a talk, and then we would eat a donut and then get our free tickets for Disneyland, and that was it. That's all we had to do. But the catch was that it was only couples that could go, so I had to pretend to be a couple with my brother, which obviously it's not like, it doesn't change anything. It's not like you're holding hands and pretending to be a couple. But I just couldn't bear it. I couldn't speak. I thought I was going to get arrested and dragged out of this place. And it was all to get into Disneyland. I was like, I'll pay for the tickets. Just couldn't cope. Anyway, in the end I did it, and we got the free tickets and had a great time. But yeah, so I've always really struggled with that. But the downside of that then was, where it kind of came to a head, was in the work environment that I ended up in, which was really the negative side. So a guy that I was working with, who was completely dishonest in lots of different ways, and I kept trying to manage him. I was his senior, so I was trying to manage him. I was trying to kind of teach him the way to behave, etc., which was never going to happen. There was no way that he was going to change the way that he dealt with situations, in the same way that I couldn't, and once you realise that, it then gave me so much courage to really stand up and do the right thing, to move on, to find the thing that was right for me, rather than just keep trying to fix other people and fix the situation around me. So that's where you kind of, it sort of shows that there's lots of evidence in your life, and when you look at the stories in your life linked to the values, you can really see it bubbles up, through the different stories, how your how that value is met. I mean, do you find that? Do you think?
Yes, absolutely, and I'll share mine as well. But I think what you're saying is like it's almost like that theme. It's like you have this theme that just runs, this one grain that is running through everything. And obviously for you, honesty being your value, has had both positive and negative, and I think that's a fair thing to share as well. So that's really helpful that you've shared both sides, so thank you for that. My top value is efficiency, as you know, because you helped me see this. So of course, efficiency is my top value, and it has been inherent in me since like day dot. I think it's not a surprise that I went to do very kind of logical type of, I've got a maths degree, and there's efficiency is like, you have maths is like you have an answer, it's right or wrong, and that kind of thing. So that's definitely got something in there. And then even things like going back to my childhood, like I remember having like a really beautiful, and it was just this very simple necklace, and it was metal, like it had metal bits in it, and it broke, and I was gutted because I loved it, and it had these little blue kind of sections. And I remember sitting in my room, and I must have been maybe 6 or 7, and I took that apart and made it into a bracelet, because that was it. I couldn't waste it, right? So wastage was like, efficiency. Well, you can't let things waste. And I think not being able to waste time, you know, that's a running theme in all the stuff that I do, not being able to waste energy. So if I have to come up and down the stairs 5 times, I don't do that. Well, why would I do that? It would really trigger me. I have to be prepared and planned in advance, right? I know what I'm doing when I do everything I need to do in a certain way. It just becomes part of how you operate, like on little things. And efficiency then on the other side is that, say I want to do something, I will look at it and really kind of get into what it is that I need to do, but I will also at the same time, my brain will be telling me how to do it quicker and easier and make it less laborious, even if I'm doing it the first time. Whereas like many times everybody says, well, first time you just kind of do it and then, you know, you work out how to. Well, sometimes I can't do that. But then I understand, like, there's a bit of a compromise, because sometimes, you know, you have to go a little bit, but because I recognise it, I try not to let that go too far. So I guess that shadow side is really helpful in that as well. And I remember when I was still working in the corporate world, I was tasked with this piece of work that the director of my area couldn't find anybody to do this, and we needed this piece of data. And when I say data, it was like, it's a whole lot of data, right? Very kind of dependent data on something that we'd sold to a client. And I was tasked with this. So he picked me because of the experience I had, because I had worked in a certain company prior for about a year, and he thought, well, she'll know something. I'm sure that's why it was. So me taking that on, like, not only did I create it, I set up macros and things, and I did all this stuff because I didn't want anyone to break it, and I wanted to be as efficient as possible. Looking back, that's it. You know, if it's not manual, and the less you can make it breakable, then the more effective it is. So And that wasn't something I was told to do, but I just had to do it that way because it made sense. Otherwise somebody would not be using it in the right way. So it can show up, like you said, in so many different ways, and it does trigger me when other people are not efficient.
Yeah.
And I think that, again, I have to accept, and I have to learn to accept that they are doing things their way. And, you know, my children are not going to be the most efficient because I am. And it's great that you mentioned that our children do not have the same core values as us. It's so helpful talking about this. I think that will be useful for others to hear as well. And I think more stories we can share, it's really helpful, isn't it, Sarah?
Yeah. And then it becomes, the more you understand it, it's like a muscle, isn't it? You know, it just becomes second nature to the decisions that you're making. And so for business, you know, and thinking about branding and not getting sucked into that world of AI where everything starts to sound the same and the same kind of examples and stories, you know, like the story about your bracelet is a perfect example of efficiency, finding the best use of something. And that's great because you've carried that into your business and helping people do the same thing in their business when they haven't got that skill. And so that's a unique way that you can explain that value for you.
Going back to that authentic brand, it's like we're building our personal brand every single day, no matter if we're doing it intentionally or not. And when we can use our values and just be uniquely us, then it just helps us to stand in our power more, because we feel confident as a person, as a mum, as a business owner, and being able to share that. Like, we know that when we hear other people's stories, we're listening, right? And it's the same thing when we're then sharing our stories, they will resonate better. And when they come from a place of understanding your values, I think it just gives you this kind of inner confidence.
Yeah, definitely. And I think the earlier that you can start to even be aware of values, you know, I think that's a really, really powerful tool to give you confidence. I worked with a business owner recently who runs a co-working space, which now, you know, obviously there's so many of them, and she didn't know how to market it. She was struggling with how, you know, other than the pictures of what it was. So when we were talking about values and we did that work, it was fascinating because, like, the story of her life, you know, everything was about her values. She was so values driven, and things like family, you know, was an absolute core value in her decision making and what was driving her. And when you looked at the co-working space, it was like walking into someone's home. It was a complete like family atmosphere and environment, and which makes them stand out, because a lot of co-working spaces aren't like that. They don't have that kind of that feel. So you can really see how it shows up in the type of work that you do, in the way that you do it. But being able to kind of feed that back into stories from your own life, like you say, just gives you that really strong foundation to stand on then, and to be able to say, this is why, this is me, and this is how I can talk about my business.
That's wonderful, Sarah. Honestly, all 3 of these episodes have been amazing. I think they will be so insightful, because values are about understanding ourselves better, and when we understand ourselves better, we accept ourselves better, our confidence grows. No doubt we can filter that into our business, because we are our business. So this has been so interesting and fascinating, and if you are not sure about how much values can help you, then I would definitely recommend that you check out Sarah's free resource on values, because it's a great way to just start dipping into that. I'll pop the links in the comments. And with regards to the work that we're both doing together on the Harmony Quest, which is also absolutely wonderful to be able to work together, where we can work on values with our client and help them to discover that. And Sarah does this on a one-to-one basis, diving deep into what their story is showing them and giving them all the evidence they need, so that they really feel like they can understand themselves. And then I pick that up, and through that client journey, through the rest of the program, we use that information so that we're always aligning to and making sure that we're completing the program in a way that is most effective for the client. So if you're interested to know more about the Harmony Quest, you can check that out on buildwithboundaries.com/harmony. So if you've loved this episode, I would love it if you could give us a rating or give us a review, put in a question and answer. There'll be a box down below if you're listening on podcasts. So it's always great to get feedback, and it gives us more reason to create more episodes like this. And you never know, we might come back and do joint ones again. So thank you so much, Sarah, for being here. It's been wonderful to have you, and such a great topic and conversation to have.
Thank you. It's been great.